Patience and Other Questionable Virtues by JA Logwood. New Delhi, 1944. In the China-India-Burma theatre, a new group is taking aim at the Japanese. FDR's Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, performs acts of sabotage, black campaigns aimed at lowering morale, and the door to the briefing room flew open and the light flicked on. The small group slouched in their chairs, jerked to attention, squinting in the sudden brightness. Georgia rolled her eyes and cut the projector. Ladies and gentlemen, Field Officer Richard Williams. Dickie, he stalked to the front. I'll keep this short. I wanted a European assignment, got this shithole, and plan on drinking away my disappointment. Leave me alone, and I'll do the same for you. Best of luck. He departed with a nod, the scent of Pall Mall cigarettes and cologne wafting behind him. Georgia sighed and looked around at her new reports. Like most OSS teams, their roster read like the setup to an elaborate joke. A cartographer, an analyst, a socialite, and an artist walk into a bar. She smiled widely, aiming for encouragement. We'll call that your first briefing. You've got the scope of it. We have no supplies, less support, and an army to undermine through subterfuge. Let's hear some ideas. How about forging a surrender order? Jerry, the artist, put forward tentatively. Good thinking, but we don't have the intel or supplies to do it right. Ink, paper, type of printing press, it all has to read as authentic. Do it wrong, and we put them on their guard. What else? Thank you letters. The analyst, Peggy, blushed as Georgia's attention fell on her. Georgia was more practiced at concealing her own interest. Go on. Letters purporting to be from allied friends, thanking them for their assistance. They'll think they've already been compromised. Not having the right ink or paper, none of that matters if we aren't trying to pass the source off as Japanese. Ground forces could plant them, and from there it's mostly luck, but we could add something about how helpful their friends were, make them think there were more collaborators in the ranks, Norman chipped in. Evening drew in around them, but the group worked on, thrumming with the energy of newly sparked camaraderie. Georgia took it in, considering they might just make this work. Massachusetts, 1984. The living room of Peggy's remote lakeside cabin hummed with conversation. Vivian was at the piano, telling Norman jokes that made his ears turn crimson. Dickie had Jerry cornered, grousing about Reagan's China trip, while she gazed into the middle distance, probably contemplating a new painting. If Peggy squinted past the grey hair and wrinkles, it was as if they were all back in New Delhi. Almost all, anyway. In this company, it was hard not to probe at the old herd. She raised her glass. To doing bad things for good causes. The former Merchants of Lies returned her salute, downing whiskey or wine. So, have you read it? Dickie's voice carried into the quiet moment, pulling everyone's attention. He gestured to his book on the coffee table. Oh, so sexy. My time among the glorious amateurs of the OSS. It was Dickie's first year attending the reunion. He'd been surprisingly hard to track down before his publishing debut. A sneer flickered across Jerry's face. I have. I found it enlightening. Norman, ever the diplomat, interjected before the conversation could sour. "Why don't we head out to the range for a little friendly competition? I assume everyone brought a firearm." Dickie brightened. "Never go anywhere without it." New Delhi, 1945. Georgia pursed her lips at the requisition fulfillment document in front of her. Again, they'd sent barely half of what she'd ordered. Vivian, the charmer, had wheedled, cajoled and bartered the team's cigarette rations to their British counterparts for supplies, but there was a limit to their generosity. Peggy burst into her quarters, brown eyes sparkling with excitement. She leaned back against the doorframe, breathless. "The Brits have a printing press!" "You don't say!" Georgia found herself smiling, the delight contagious. "A bearing 209 offset. Someone local was selling it cheap. Georgia, this is what we've been waiting for. It opens so many doors." Dazzling, headstrong and too nosy by half, the clever analyst had laid claim to her heart and her bed within the first month. Peggy would have to learn some discretion if their affair was to last past this assignment, though. Georgia would bet dollars to donuts she'd rushed straight up here, no thought of being seen. Fortunately, the team here were good eggs. Minus Dickie, but he was too deep in bottles of expensive liquor and high-stakes poker games to notice. The wider world would be less forgiving. Still, the prospect of a life together outside of this place lit sparks of hope bright enough to distract her from her worries. Tucking her concerns away, Georgia took Peggy by the hand and pulled her to the couch. "Come on, girl genius. Tell me all your plans." Much later, Georgia stood from her bed, careful not to wake Peggy, and retrieved the requisition papers. She read them again by the weak light from the window. Item, bearing 209 offset press. Status, lost in transit. Signatory, R. Williams. It couldn't be a coincidence. The same model missing from her requisition surfacing on the local market. Someone had hawked her press. She had a good idea who. She needed to talk to the Brits about this local source. Massachusetts, 1984. Peggy picked her way along the garden path in the moonlight, collecting flowers for the morning. Dickie and Vivian were ensconced on the porch. It wouldn't do to disturb them. Following the trail onto the beach, she stopped at the targets. Most showed good shots, clustered at centre of gravity. Norman's was a mess. He never was good with a revolver. Then there was the one she'd been looking for. Shots high and to the left of centre. Fingers pressed to her own chest, she fought the memory. New Delhi, 1945. Georgia moved quickly through the narrow streets, grateful for the cover of night. Peggy'd been eyeing her suspiciously all week, too aware of her comings and goings. Slipping away unnoticed for her meeting with the British officer's vendor had taken all of Georgia's counterintelligence training. 2 left turns, a quick backtrack for good measure, and she arrived. The alleyway off Chori Bazaar was empty and quiet. A few lanterns shone from the residences above the storefronts, but there was no sign of the frenetic daytime bustle. She approached the last stall and knocked 3 times. A rare breeze blew by, carrying the scent of pall malls and aqua de Parma. She froze. The glint of moonlight off gunmetal on a balcony above registered a moment too late. The bullet's impact spun her round and she landed on her back on the street. Blood poured from her, pooling onto the pavement. It was a sloppy shot. She wasn't dead yet, but she would be soon. The bastard had left her enough time to know it. Above her, the midnight sky offered no light or solace. just an abyss that echoed the horrible aloneness spreading through her. Then, footfalls. Someone was running, falling to the ground beside her. Peggy had tailed her after all. Clever girl. Strong arms wrapped around her. Georgia, don't you dare! We're leaving this place together, remember? Sorry, girl genius, she gasped. Got a little impatient. She fixed her gaze on those sparkling brown eyes until the darkness took her. Massachusetts, 1984. Mist clung to the lake, catching the pre-dawn light as Peggy walked onto the dock. Dickie, who'd been examining the rowboat, turned at the sound of her footfalls. His grin wobbled. Sorry, I'm expecting someone else. He glanced behind her, brows knitted. Vivian's come down with a stomach bug. She asked me to take her place. I brought coffee. Hop in. Peggy moved around him nimbly and took a seat at the oars. After a moment of hesitation, he followed. Right then, sunrise tour, you and me. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Peggy untied the mooring and began to row. The slap of the wood on water echoed across the lake. By the time they reached the center of the lake, Dickie was looking at her speculatively. She secured the oars and retrieved the thermos and cups from her pack. Black coffee, right? He nodded, accepting the steaming mug but making no move to drink. She poured for herself, taking several restorative sips. The corner of his mouth twitched and he shook his head before taking a long draw of the hot liquid. He closed his eyes with a contented sigh and drained the rest of his cup. Minutes crept by as they watched the sun crest, glorious and golden, over the horizon. That's worth the price of admission, Dickie said, his pinky finger twitching rhythmically. You're good at putting a price on things, aren't you, Dickie? Gamblers always are. Tell me, what's the going rate for a life these days? His revolver appeared with one smooth motion. What's your game, Peggy? She smiled. That would be more threatening if it was loaded, Dickie. His eyes went wide, then hard. When? When you were on the porch with Vivian. You're a terrible spy, you know. Not much better as a thief, either. Good enough to... The gun slipped from his grasp as the tremor increased. He looked down at his hands in surprise. What's happening? That's the poison kicking in. But you... He gestured at her mug. As I said, you're a terrible spy. The thermos is rigged with 2 compartments. A little trick I learned from Georgia. You remember her, don't you? You wouldn't get your hands dirty, he croaked, real fear finally surfacing. Peggy felt a prickle of satisfaction. I've spent my life whispering into the dark, hoping it would ruin lives, sow discord, break down empires. You think taking a life, your life, is harder? I expect it'll be refreshingly direct. She untied the anchor from the bow. Dickie's breathing was coming in short pants now. He retched over the edge, bringing up too little, too late. I've had to be patient, but I spent my time wisely. You wouldn't believe how many delightfully deadly plants you can just grow right in your own backyard. Belladonna, water hemlock, even Strychnos nux vomica from our old stomping ground. And of course I've had help. Norman, with his maps, helped me find this place. Lovely old reservoir. Deep, too. Jerry crafted those invitations, made you think this was a top-secret event. Couldn't resist that, could you? Vivian, of course, got you out to the dock. The whole team, back for one last mission. How do you know? We've always suspected, but your book sealed it. Shouldn't have implied she was a thief, she tutted. Too many details you couldn't have known. Your shots yesterday confirmed it. Always high and to the left. You won't get away. His words tapered off, a trickle of spittle dribbling down his chin. No. Who knows you're here, Dickie? Moreover, who's going to care? Maybe your publicist, eventually. Certainly not your last ex-wife. He'd slid from the seat, rigidity creeping into his muscles, but watched her with pinpoint pupils as she secured the anchor's rope around him. No, Dickie. It's you who won't get away with it. Next came the tricky part. She and Norman had practiced for days to get the leverage right. In the end, like so much of their work, it was messier than she'd have liked. He caught on an oarlock, half submerged, backside up, one foot twitching frantically. A final heave deposited him ignominiously into the icy water, to be swallowed by the dark depths. Bubbles trickled slowly to a stop. The water's surface settled back into glossy stillness, inky as the midnight sky in New Delhi. Mission accomplished, Georgia, Peggy whispered, pointing the boat towards home and her waiting friends.